All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, today I have the pleasure of having a lifelong friend with me, Coach Dennis Ward. I want to thank him, as always, for joining us. And, D, there's a lot to talk about with what transpired last night in Game 7 between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Brooklyn Nets. There's a lot to talk about in regards to this series, a lot of excitement, a lot of questions, and I want to get your take first and foremost on this series.
Well, first I'll start off by saying, wow, what a game last night. Honestly, you text me and I told you, I fell asleep. I had to go and watch the replay. That was a spectacular game. That's one of the better basketball games you're gonna see, man. That's up there with Game 6, Phoenix versus the Bulls. That's up there, man. That's a really great game. That's gonna be a rewatchable game for years to come. And you know, right now the NBA and what's going on is just a battle of attrition. Whoever is the healthiest is going to be the one that is going to come out the victor in the end. That's what it's looking like right now because obviously James Harden was not 100%. He couldn't do his normal things to help KD out. And to just, paraphrase it and keep it simple and short and quick, KD ran out of gas, man. He was gassed. You know, Steve Nash, he's a rookie coach. He played his starters the entire game. There was a stat, where the starters scored almost all of the points on both sides, except for the 9 points scored by Pat Connaughton, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just going off the top of the head. Maybe we need to look that up. But the starters scored all the points on both teams. I don't even know if I've ever seen that. 9 bench points out of Connaughton is pretty much nothing. But the stars were on display last night. Those guys made a concerted effort to try to be in the best chance that they could.
Yeah, I look at it and, I'm with you. That's one thing that, stuck out to me. The Brooklyn Nets got no productivity off of their bench whatsoever. Jeff Green only played 13 minutes. They got no points whatsoever. Blake Griffin gave him 17 before he fouled out. James Harden gave him 22, but it was a very quiet 22 because, honestly, since James Harden came back from that hamstring injury, he was only a shell of himself. And, you look at it and you have to ask yourself, honestly, if Kyrie doesn't get hurt, I don't think James Harden plays for the rest of the series. But it was just you look at it and the Nets were desperate. And, Kyrie's injury really changed a lot of things for that series. Milwaukee, they focused on KD so much more in that series. They were putting the bodies in front of him. Granted, PJ Tucker is not as tall as Kevin Durant is, but, he's strong and he was just being as physical with him as he possibly could have been. A lot of questionable calls last night by the refs in favor of Brooklyn. But nonetheless, to your point, KD ran out of gas in overtime because you could see it. The jump shots were not there, and he wasn't getting to the basket. Other teammates weren't getting to the basket enough. And, from playing basketball, when your legs go, your jump shots, they're not going to be there. And honestly, I think the Bucks, you can't say the woulda, coulda, shoulda thing, but it's one of those where they should be thankful that Kevin Durant's shoe was not one size smaller because with that shot in overtime at the end of the fourth quarter, that would have been a 3-pointer, but nonetheless, man, it was a heartbreaking loss for the Nets. Granted, you know what? It was a gut check win for the Bucks, and I know that like we've talked about the injuries so far in this postseason. But guess what? Even with the 2 air balls last night from the free throw line, Giannis still stepped up and gave him 40 points. And the toughness that people talked about with Milwaukee maybe last year in the playoff bubble where they got punked by Miami. They came back and swept Miami this year. Granted, Miami wasn't the same team. And, they pushed past Brooklyn last night. And I sent a text message to a few people last night, and I said, that missed shot by Kevin Durant at the end of overtime may have saved Mike Budenholzer's job in Milwaukee because remember, there was talks that, without a deep run into the playoffs this year, Budenholzer could be out of a job in Milwaukee. So now you've got the Bucks back in the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in the last 3 years now.
100% it saved Budenholzer's job. And, you know, when you win sometimes, it's about timing. And it looks like Milwaukee is on the right type of timing. Miami wasn't 100%. Now they had Brooklyn not 100%. So they're going to get either Philly or Atlanta, okay? And Philly, they match up well with Philly. They have, their teams are pretty much identical almost in some ways. They have Drew Holiday being the one difference maker that they'll have over what they have over in Philly. And it's going to be in their best interest to get it done now. I think there's no other window. If Milwaukee does not win this year, Giannis does not win in Milwaukee. He's going to have to leave in order to win a championship. This is it right now. And you look at the other side of the bracket. You have the Clippers, who match up well versus the Suns, and it looks like they're going to get a Clipper team with an injured Kawhi. It's not going to get any better than this. Milwaukee's going to become a championship team. This has to be the run. Philly's right for the taking, and Embiid is not 100%. Just look at it. They're pretty much the healthiest team right now. I mean, Giannis is pretty much made of steel. He doesn't get hurt, plays ridiculously hard, plays a lot of minutes. This is it, Will. If Milwaukee doesn't win this year, if Milwaukee doesn't take advantage of this right now, this window, it's never happening.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I couldn't agree more with you on that. I mean, Milwaukee, you look at it and like you said it best, this has been a war of attrition this year so far. You look at so many teams that like came into the playoffs injured, and of course, that's a reason why a lot of those teams are not around. The Lakers weren't healthy. We see what happened with the Nets. You mentioned Philly. You now look at the Clippers with Kawhi, and I don't care what anybody says, that knee injury is more serious than they're leading on. That's a topic for another day. CP3 right now with the Phoenix Suns, even Denver and not having Jamal Murray. So you look at it with Milwaukee. The timing is impeccable, and sometimes it's like that because I mean you go back to the Golden State run, and a couple of times they didn't have to face a healthy Cleveland team. They faced San Antonio one time in the Western Conference Finals, and of course Kawhi got hurt. And then, of course, one time in the Western Conference Finals, they were down 3-2 to Houston, and then Chris Paul got hurt. So it's one of those, sometimes it's not about who you play, but more like who you don't have to play. And I said that coming into these playoffs more than ever, especially on the Western Conference side, because, it was going to be a dogfight. And that's what we've seen so far. And I think that's the way it's going to continue to be. But you look at it from the Nets standpoint, I mean, nobody can accuse Kevin Durant of, not leaving it all out there. I mean, he did. He put that team on his back for the past few games as much as anybody could. It was just unfortunate for, the Nets' sake and his sake that he wasn't able to do it enough to get them to that next level. And you look at Game 7, the bottom line is Giannis had a better supporting cast around him last night than KD did. It was a situation where, you had 4 guys out there just waiting for KD to make it happen. Blake Griffin did make a couple of shots. Again, James Harden was a shell of himself. And it was like, even I looked at, James Harden at some points last night, he had the opportunity, to really drive and get to the basket, make a floater or something like that. And, he was just being a decoy. So it's one of those where it's unfortunate for the Nets from the standpoint that, hey, their big three really was never healthy all season long. And you know what? It finally caught up to them at the most inopportune time, which, of course, was last night.
I'm going to say this, remember when everybody got hurt on LeBron when he made it to the finals against Golden State, and he was literally out there going for broke? I mean, put up some of the most ridiculous numbers that you ever saw a basketball player put up, and ridiculous shot percentages and you know, KD kind of sort of gave me shades of that these last couple of games. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep my team in the game. And because he's one of the best scorers we've ever seen in this game, he was able to do that. And, he earned, not to say he had to earn my respect, but I look at him a little bit differently now because I have to give him a little bit more credit in the standpoint of his perseverance, and because you get a different idea of him from him leaving OKC, almost like I couldn't do it by myself, so I had to go to Golden State. Now he's in Brooklyn. He's trying to do it by himself. He's really trying to prove that he can do it by himself, even though he's got Kyrie and James Harden now. And he was looking to prove something these last couple of games. And not that he has to prove anything. Again, you know, right now, as it stands, he's the all-time leading scorer in Game 7s. He's got the highest points per game in Game 7s. Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. I mean, what he did the last 2 games is very impressive. It looked like KD's not going to miss. And now what you're thinking, when he gets the ball at the end of the game, is that the ball's going in. The only other person I remember feeling like that about is MJ. When they're taking that shot, whether it's a fadeaway, whether he's got the whole team in his face, if he's open, you believe that ball – I thought that last shot was going in. It looked like it was going in.
I did too, and I mean, you talk about his performance last night and, you mentioned earlier some of the great game 7s, for me, one of my first indoctrinations to basketball when I was a kid was, Dominique and Larry Bird, years ago. I want to say it was 87 or 88 in the second round in the Eastern Conference playoffs. That was one of the great playoff duels. You think about Game 7, of course, the 2016 finals when LeBron and the Cavs got the best of Golden State, and of course, LeBron put Cleveland on his back for that championship. You think about Game 6 several years ago with San Antonio and Miami, with Ray Allen making that big shot. I mean, listen, that game is right up there within that mix of all of those contests. It had a great storyline to it. It was a situation where Milwaukee had so much against them. I mean, a raucous crowd in Brooklyn. You heard how the crowd was going at Giannis on the free throw line. We saw a lot of the calls, going against the Bucks. A lot of questionable calls as well. I really thought easily 2 of those fouls that were called on PJ Tucker should not have been called fouls when he was guarding KD. I think it was one of those, KD got the benefit of the doubt on those calls.
That one on James Harden when he went for the 3 and they called the foul on Giannis.
Yeah.
Was it Giannis? That was terrible.
Yeah, and
he didn't even touch him. It looked like he pulled his foot in to act like he landed on his foot on purpose, but he wasn't hurt at all.
And to your point, that's something. Things like that are something that the NBA is actually going to look at this offseason in regards to offensive players leaning in to defenders to try to draw the contact, to get the foul call, which I think is good because, I mean, some guys, James Harden has kind of made a living off of that. And, now Trae Young is kind of picking up on that as well as Luka Doncic. But nonetheless, it was a situation where I said all season long, Steve Nash's inability as a head coach, because I was never sold on him being the head coach of the Nets. Whatever you can't do is always going to show up at the most inopportune time. And yesterday, was Game 7, and it really showed up in regards to Steve Nash's, inexperience as a head coach. I mean, Budenholzer's been there and done that. I mean, he was an assistant for many years with the Spurs under Greg Popovich. He had success, with the Atlanta Hawks and now with the Milwaukee Bucks. So he's more of a seasoned guy. And I know that Steve Nash has Mike D'Antoni as his top assistant, but it's still a difference when it's coming from the head man. And there needed to be some type of adjustment made yesterday. I mean, the minutes, it was crazy. I mean, granted, you live by your stars, you die by your stars in those Game 7 scenarios, but it's one of those. I mean, maybe if the Nets had gotten a little bit more productivity out of their bench, we're having a different conversation this morning. You look at the Bucks, Giannis had a better supporting cast around him last night, and that's a big reason why Milwaukee's back in the Eastern Conference Finals.
You think of the other teams of the past that used to keep these I call them combustible guards. And I feel like as a team, you should always try and find one of these guys. I'll give you an example. Vinny Johnson, Bobby Jackson,
Vernon
Eddie
Maxwell.
House, like these Vernon Maxwell. But Vernon Maxwell used to start. I'm talking about guys that
Guys off
spend
the
their career
bench.
coming off the
Off the
bench.
bench. Okay, I got you.
Right. They were combustible type of guys that could come off the bench, get hot, and carry you for a little bit. Lou Williams, of course. I can't forget Lou Williams.
Right.
Jamal Crawford. I'm surprised nobody picked him up. Like, he would have been a perfect guy to have last night.
Yeah.
If you're Brooklyn.
Right.
No James Harden. F it. We throw Jamal out there. If he gets hot, we ride him.
Yeah. No, you're right.
You need to have guys like that. I don't see enough guys like that around the NBA. And listen, one of the reasons why I was so scared for Philly to play the Hawks, because I felt like Trae Young is so combustible. This game tonight, he could get hot and carry them. And it's really not much you can do if that guy gets hot.
Yeah.
And they have Seth Curry who can get hot too, but they're just two different type of players. And Seth Curry's not gonna have the ball in his hands enough to impact the game the way Trae Young is going to,
right,
if he indeed gets hot tonight. But to stay on topic, you need to have a guy like that on your team. All right, I'll give you an example. Look at the Clippers. Kawhi's out. Terrence Mann, 39 points. What the hell? 39 points off a bench guy? He literally replaced Kawhi Leonard that game. Literally replaced Kawhi Leonard. From a defensive standpoint, from the shot making standpoint, you got to have guys, and guys like that in the playoffs are the guys that carry you through those rough games when the stars don't have it that night. Because you can't really – it's unrealistic to expect the star to have it every single night. It's just not the way it is. Nobody has it every single night. But when you don't have it, if you have that guy that has the potential to get hot and carry you for a little while, look, let's not rule out Lou Williams getting hot tonight coming off the bench and having an 18-point quarter. Like, these guys are important. And when I coach teams, I always try to have one guy like that I would even take somebody who should start and bring them off the bench just to have that ability to have somebody come in the game with that type of energy. Brooklyn has to get their bench better. Now, because they have so much money soaked into the starters, we're not going to see that guy. Somebody's going to have to take a pay cut to go there to fill that role that I'm referring to, but they need that guy. They need somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Nets for next season. I mean, Blake Griffin, his contract is up, and I mean, I don't see a situation where he's taking less than $5 million again. Spencer Dinwiddie has already declined his option, so he's looking at the writing on the wall, and he's saying, hey, you know what? I can win with these guys, but guess what? If you're gonna have three ball-oriented guys like Kyrie, KD, and Harden next season, when am I gonna get my shots?
And put a pin in that right there. He's the guy. He's the guy they missed.
But the thing is like I don't see him, because I look at it and he probably has a chance, to go out there and get a good payday. Not a big payday, but a decent payday from somebody. I don't.
Oh no, he could get $100 million probably.
So I mean, listen, it all depends. Like who's, like what teams have the cap money to spend, and who wants to do it. But the thing is, I don't see him saying, you know what, I'll just suck it up and take like $2 or $3 million, to stay here and be behind the scenes with the Nets. I don't see it. What's gonna have to happen is what we saw when Boston got Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and KG together, and then what happened with LeBron team with Wade and Bosh down in Miami. It's gonna have to be a situation where they get veteran players who are just like, you know what, I want to win, and I'll take like less money because I've already made my bread and go out there. I could see Blake Griffin coming back to Brooklyn at the right price. Because, I mean, let's be realistic. Nobody's going to give Blake Griffin another max contract. I mean, I think you and I could really agree on that. But the thing is like if Blake is, how much is he willing to not take? Because, I mean, when you think about Kyrie, KD, and James Harden all alone, that's nearly $120 million right there committed to the salary cap next season for those three players. You still got 12 other guys to put on the team. So, they got to figure it out. It's one of those I've never. I know D'Antoni was an assistant coach on this team. It's one of those where I've always questioned, the defensive effort with guys like that. Steve Nash came from that school. At the same time, you know what? Listen, they've got some work ahead of them because you look at it, the hope is to have all three of these guys back healthy next season. They will have a training camp together this off season, and they'll have an opportunity to get some cohesion. But like you said, it comes down to the people around them. You gotta put the pieces in place. The Nets darn sure aren't going to do it through the draft because they've mortgaged their future, in draft picks. How many picks did the Houston Rockets get from them? When the James Harden trade was executed this season. So, in my opinion, that's how I see the Nets are going to have to go through it to try to get over that hump. First of all, getting healthy, but trying to find the veteran players that are going to be willing to come down to Brooklyn and play for less money.
That's going to be very important. And, the chemistry that it's going to bring to the team. But, there's no substitute for youth. And sometimes what happens is you keep cycling in these guys that are at the end of their career, hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. Like when the Cleveland Cavaliers traded for D Rose at the end of the season, he was still, I don't know what was happening with him at the time. Now he looks great on the Knicks. Lance Stevenson into the Lakers last year. Like, you could just keep going on and on. Everybody tries it. But the Nets, the way they construct it, they're gonna have to get 4 or 5 guys like that. They plucked a guy from overseas who really played well for them. And honestly, if you ask me, this is where you got to trust somebody that you don't really want to trust. I'll give you an example. James Harden is struggling. They got Mike James on the bench. Mike James is only available because his contract got voided overseas because he was over there going crazy. I think he was averaging like 30 points a game overseas. He was like one of the top overseas guards, and somehow his contract got voided, William. I don't know if you know about the story, and that's how come they were able to sign him like that. Did you see how well he was playing when they put him in? They don't know what they would have got out that guy last night. Like, sometimes you just have to trust that you're going to have to go out on faith and play a guy who you think is going to give you some energy and go from there. And I think Steve Nash might have had to learn a little bit of a lesson there in this game last night, because they were out there searching for energy. And then their offense was everybody clear out to one side and then throw the ball to KD. KD was just so tired, he couldn't do what KD does.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the fact that when they did that, it didn't allow for a play to be made. So everybody's all on the left. He's on the right mid post. They dump it in there, and you can't even get a cutter. You can't even get a extra pass rotation. Everything was pinned down on KD. Make a miss. I mean, they were sending a trap. He just had to shoot over it because there was no pass to make.
Well,
So
let's not forget earlier this season, this is like, Kyrie Irving going back and saying, you know what, we don't need a head coach. Yes, you do, because you need a guy who's going to make those key personnel decisions in those key moments. And again, Steve Nash's inexperience as a head coach showed up last night at the most inopportune time for the Brooklyn Nets. There had to be an adjustment made at some point. You got to try something else. And I mean, granted, Kevin Durant gave them a Herculean effort last night, but it just was not enough. And, you look at it, it's the woulda, coulda, shoulda game. But you know what? This is going to be a long, interesting off season for the Nets. The one thing I can say, or one of the things that I can say going in the Nets' favor right now, is they're going to have an opportunity to rest, because you figure it's, mid to late June right now. Season's not going to begin until, around the end of October. So you're looking at it. So these guys are going to have about 3 to 4 months to get, get some rest and get healthy. And that's the other thing. Honestly, if for the sake of argument, let's say that the Nets were able to win that game last night, I don't think that they still would have had issues going forward in the conference finals, because you look at it, James Harden's hamstring still wasn't right. And, you played ball before, you've coached ball, and you still coach ball. You don't get over a sprained ankle that easily. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, honestly, I probably would have foreseen a scenario where you might have seen Kyrie back maybe mid-series in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Kyrie still wouldn't have been Kyrie, because, a lot of what he does is predicated off of his explosiveness, especially off of that first step. And you know that from playing ball, you got a bad ankle, it limits your explosiveness. So, they still would have been fighting an uphill battle. So I think one thing going forward for them right now is the opportunity to get healthy.
I mean, getting healthy is one thing. It's not even about getting healthy because they'll get healthy. Can they stay healthy, William? Can that team stay healthy for a whole season? You have a guy in Kyrie Irving who historically gets hurt every year. And when he's not taking days off for personal reasons, I've never seen anybody else take more personal days in the NBA. But, like, they have to stay on the court in order for them to win because they don't have anybody else to make up the slack. They got 3 stars. Them 3 stars got to stay healthy through the playoff run or they'll never win with that group. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say more than likely every single year that they're together, somebody's gonna get hurt.
Well, I mean, you look at it, it's a situation where, just like you talked about, there's never going to be a better time for the Bucks to win. You know what? I look at it for next season. It's now or never for the Nets, because you look at it, KD's not getting any younger, and neither is James Harden. And I think it's going to be a situation where, first and foremost, people will give you the benefit of the doubt and say, "Hey, you know what? You guys had injuries this year, but you know how it is in New York. It's a what have you done for me lately type of city." And as good as Kevin Durant was, there are going to be critics in New York City that are going to say, "Hey, what? As good as you were, it was not good enough to get your team to that next level." It's unfortunate, but that's the way that, like, some people in New York City view things. So I think for next season, they're definitely going to have to try to find a way to get over that hump. The way things look right now, the East still is not easy. I mean, it would have been an interesting scenario to see what would have happened if Brooklyn had played Philly, for an example, in the Eastern Conference Finals, because coming into the playoffs, that's the way that I did see things planning out. Of course, not expecting Kyrie Irving to get injured, because I really think that changed the dynamic of this. Because remember, the Nets are up 2-0 in this series. And I mean, that game 2, they beat the brakes off of Milwaukee. And, that series really changed after the Kyrie injury. But you look at it, they got to find a way to do it. So I think, this front office for Brooklyn, they went all out to get James Harden this year. Now I think they got to find a way to go all out and, get that bench and get that depth around these guys for next season, because you're not dealing with spring chickens right now. Kevin Durant, he's been in the NBA since 2007. A lot of mileage on him. James Harden's been there since 2009. A lot of mileage on him. Kyrie Irving's been there since 2011. We talked about the injury history, especially with Kyrie Irving. Let's not forget Kevin Durant was coming back from an Achilles injury as well. So it's a situation where it's put up or shut up, and it's now or never for the Nets.
Well, that falls in the lap of Sean Marks. He's going to have to get creative. I just don't see – they're going to have to get guys to take pay cuts, and they're going to be out there with zero youth. And I always think it's good to have youth on your team at somewhere. So the only young guy they keep that they play is Nicholas Claxton. Everyone else is going to be like a journeyman. They're going to need to find a way to circumvent that. It's really no substitute for it. You see these teams that can inject that young – I go back to Terrence Mann again. Like, when you could put a young, hungry player on the court, it does something for the play of the team all around as a whole. And they're going to have a bunch of over-the-hill gang. Look, Jeff Green. Look at the game he had 2 games ago. He didn't miss. Who was he at last night?
He didn't take a shot last night. He didn't take a shot last night at all. He only played. He only played 13 minutes.
They needed Jeff Green.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they have to do. But I mean, on the flip side, is this going to propel Milwaukee to, like, even bigger and better things, man?
I don't know, man. I think they're in the right situation at the right time. I don't see them any differently. To be honest, I don't think they played any better than they did before. They just were in the perfect situation for the time. You understand what I'm saying? They play exactly how they play. Giannis is still missing free throws. Middleton is still the one to take the big shots and hit the big shots. They just were able to get past a hobbled Brooklyn Net team. Now let's see how they start out with this next round. But like I said, if they don't, they're not going to be any different, William. Trust me. Philly's going to have to hand it to them. Joel Embiid's going to have to stay on the court. I don't think Atlanta can beat them uh, 4 times. But Philly is going to beat them when Joel Embiid is able to play his normal amount. But he's still hobbled. So this is the window, man. The door's wide open for them. They just got to walk through it. If they
Yeah,
play their normal game, they end up in the finals, William. And if they play and I think the Clippers take the Suns out because the Suns just don't have the length overall as a team on the wings to handle Kawhi and George and Paul George together. If Kawhi plays now, remember, you said you brought him up. Remember, when he came out in the draft, he had a degenerative knee condition, which is why they've been resting him since he was on the Spurs. San Diego State, when he came to the NBA draft combine, they found that knee condition. Similar, not too far off from the Todd Gurley knee condition that they knew about when the Rams drafted him. So this is not going to get any better for Kawhi, which is why you see him take games off. And then he comes back looking like $1 million. He just has a bad knee. It's never going to get better. So, and you, like you said, you think it's a lot worse? I don't think he plays game 1.
honestly, I don't. Very quickly, I don't see a scenario where Kawhi really plays in this series at all. It's just the fact that I think not having Chris Paul is going to hurt the Suns more than the Clippers not having Kawhi Leonard, just due to the fact that CP3 generates so much. He is the prototypical floor general, and he brings everything together for that Phoenix Suns team. You look at the Clippers. I mean, they came back and tied that series up 2 games apiece with Kawhi. But I think after Game 5, when they were able to go to Salt Lake City and beat the Jazz without Kawhi, they got some confidence. And even, in their Game 6 series clincher on Friday night versus the Jazz at home, they never wavered, even when they were down like big at halftime. They stuck to their game plan. They got hot. They had confidence. I've never seen, at least in a Clipper uniform, I have not seen Paul George this confident. Honestly, I haven't seen Paul George this confident since his days with the Indiana Pacers. So I think the Clippers are in a good spot. But getting back to subject, with Milwaukee here, I agree. This is their time. If it's now or never, I think regardless of everything that we've talked about with them, like facing teams without that haven't been like healthy. You look at it, Drew Holiday is an upgrade for them at the guard position over Eric Bledsoe. So that is definitely something that's going to work in their favor. If they play Philly, when is Danny Green going to come back? Because, Danny Green, fits into what Philly can do. Like you said, Embiid's not 100%. Ben Simmons continues to be an offensive liability. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. If it's a situation where you're talking about Milwaukee playing Atlanta, I give the size advantage to Milwaukee, and they have to take advantage of that. Trae Young is going to be Trae Young, but I think Milwaukee needs to still go out there and focus on doing what they're doing. But you look at it, I think the ultimate equalizer is the fact that, Mike Budenholzer is playing for his job, coaching for his job, rather. And I think, he's probably saying, okay, maybe I have a better chance of being back here next year. But, if you do something, which is get to the NBA Finals, and it's been more than 50 years or close to 50 years since Milwaukee did that, I think, Budenholzer really wouldn't have to worry about not coming back there next season. But I agree with you. The Bucks are in a good spot right now. This is probably their best chance to get to the finals. I mean, you look at it, you think about it 2 years ago, they made the conference finals, they won their first 2, and then Toronto and Kawhi came back and got the next 4. Last year, they did have the top seed. Giannis was MVP for the second consecutive season, but they just got punked by Miami in the bubble in the second round. There's no other way to say it. So I agree with you. This is probably their best chance, man. So we have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, best and only chance, Will. And going back to the Philly, I've talked about this at length with other people, my friends that big come and call me, Al, what do you think of Ben Simmons? And I'm like, listen, one thing that I've watched Him and Embiid occupy the same space. What do I mean by that, William? They have to be in the same place on the court to be effective. What does that mean from a basketball standpoint? You cannot play them together. They've been trying this for a long time. Now, I thought Brett Brown was onto something when he started moving him to the 4 and using a more conventional lineup because it was allowing him to just be a finisher. But when you cause him to play make and they back off of the screen, when he's going into the screen and roll game, you clog the paint, which is why you see him be shooting all these threes. Remember this day, because Philly will not be what they can be until they trade Ben Simmons. But what they better get for him is someone that can make plays. But I believe Ben Simmons should play in a D'Antoni-like style system and play center. Just my personal opinion. I think that's what he should be playing. I think the whole love affair with him being a point guard, it's cute, it's cuddly, it's pretty. He looks nice running up and down the court with the basketball. He throws crazy passes. I'm not taking away from his talent. If you want to win, he's got to play power forward or center. My opinion, that's just me. That's just the way I look at him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you from that standpoint as well, because I mean, you look at it, and anytime that you get somebody who's 6'7" and taller with a handle, naturally people want to gravitate and compare him to being the next Magic Johnson. There's only one Magic Johnson. I mean, if we've only really seen a few guys who are bigger that came into the NBA with point guard tendencies. I mean, of course, Lamar Odom. I mean, you saw, Lamar up and close and stuff like that when he was younger. But, Lamar had that crazy growth spurt in high school.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. But, it's very few and far between that you see scenarios like that. I mean, you look at Ben Simmons, and it's just like Ben Simmons is one of those guys. It's just like, yeah, he has potential. But, I mean, his game has not gotten better since he came into the NBA. And it's to the point that, he's an offensive liability. And, in those key situations for Philly, they're playing 4-on-5. So unless, they take care of their business tonight, if it's a close game come fourth quarter, if I'm Doc Rivers, I sit him down, because we've seen what's happened in those clutch moments, in the past couple of games. And it's really been a detriment to Philly. They blew game 4. They blew game 5. And, honestly, for what it's worth, the series really should be over if they were able to finish their business. And I said it the other night, Philly, I know it's been 2 years since he's been there, but Philly's missing Jimmy Butler from the standpoint that he gave them a finisher and he gave them a leader. And B's not that guy yet at this point in his career. And we just talked about Ben Simmons being an offensive liability. So how's he going to be a finisher? That's one thing that's really hurting Philly. And it's even if they get past Atlanta, just as a final thought, even if they get past Atlanta in the series, it's something that is going to catch up to them at some point.
Well, they're going to have to find the others. So what I would do if I was Doc Rivers, I'm no pro coach, but this is me. I play through Tobias Harris in the clutch. That's the guy I will go through and see if he can get me somewhere. He's got the best combination of in-between game, and he can fill in the blanks. 2, I'd play Shake Milton. He's what I call a combustible guy. He can help Philly win a game. And I'd probably try and see what I can get out of George Hill. He's another guy that has an uncanny knack for coming up big in big moments. So they're going to have to get something out of these guys if they're going to win this game. But as a whole, going forward, I just don't see a way for this to continue the way it is. They have to find guard play. Remember, they drafted Markelle Fultz. It didn't pan out. They kind of sort of dumped him in a trade. They knew they needed that guy, William. They just couldn't, they didn't hit when they drafted Fultz. So that's really how that messed them up. But, they really are going to have to do something in terms of personnel next year. I don't believe they win the Eastern Conference, though. They are going to lose to Milwaukee if they get past the Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's, I think either way we're in for a very interesting Eastern Conference Finals, as Milwaukee awaits the winner. Of course, that game between Philly and Atlanta will be tonight. For the Nets, they got to go back to the drawing board. But you know what? That's what it is. That's what the playoffs comes down to. 16 teams. and 15 teams are going to see their seasons end, on a sour note. And the Nets now find themselves in that position going into the summer. So, Coach Ward, as always, it was a pleasure, my brother. Happy Father's Day to you. And if there's
Happy
any,
Father's Day, bro.
thank you. And if there is anything that you want to go out there and promote about what you're doing to the folks, now is the time. The floor is yours.
Right now, just coaching youth football, Brooklyn Chiefs, coaching the 11U. I'm a head coach, and right now we are getting ready to go into season. I mean, of course, kids are welcome at any point in time. I'll send you the information to where you can put it in the body of the video. And anybody looking for their kid to play youth football, bring them on down. We're taking kids from 5 to 14 right now, and we're just out there to try and help the youth get better. That's it.
Listen, that definitely
As
sounds like.
far as basketball is concerned, I'm not really doing too much right now, but I'll update you on that.
All right, listen. That definitely sounds like a plan. This man is not afraid to roll up his sleeves and do a lot of work with the youth in his community. And like I've always told you, and I will continue to tell you, we commend you. And honestly, in my mind, we don't commend you enough. So that's why, every time that you're here, I bring it up, and I always want to give you your props on that one.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man.
And, for me, you can continue to check me out here. And if you like what you saw and heard today, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. And for Coach Dennis Ward of Sounding Off, take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.